Kimday stared at the broken glass container on his lab floor and wanted to scream. The third experiment of the day had failed, and now green alien slime was spreading across the white tiles like some kind of nightmare pudding his research partner. Yoon Hannah stood nearby with her arms crossed and that look on her face that meant another lecture was coming. The space station Aurora floated quietly in the dark between stars, but inside the xenobiology lab, everything felt chaotic and wrong. Day had been studying alien life forms for 3 years now, and today felt like his worst day ever. The coffee machine in the break room was broken. The air recycling system kept making weird noises, and now this mess on the floor. Hannah started talking about proper containment protocols again. Her voice was sharp and annoying like fingernails on metal. Day tried to listen, but his mind kept wandering to how boring his life had become. Wake up, eat breakfast, go to lab, study alien bacteria, eat lunch. Study more bacteria, eat dinner, sleep, repeat every single day was exactly the same while Hannah droned on about safety measures. Day picked up his notebook and started drawing. He did this when he was stressed or bored, which lately was most of the time. His pencil moved across the paper almost by itself, creating a small creature that looked like a mix between a cat and a person. It had big eyes, pointed ears, and small fangs that looked cute instead of scary. He added a long, fluffy tail that curved around its body. The drawing made him smile for the first time all day. He imagined what it would be like to have a companion like this. Something cute and friendly that could make the boring research work more interesting. Maybe it could sit on his desk and make funny comments about the alien samples, or help him organize his notes in a way that actually made sense without really thinking about it. Day muttered under his breath, "I wish I had a cute alien friend, someone I could call sweet." Fang, to make this place less boring, he was still sketching, adding little details to the creature's face when he said it. The words just slipped out like they had a mind of their own. What Day did not know was that the station's new quantum translator was still running from their morning meeting with the Galactic Council. The device was supposed to be turned off after official business, but someone had forgotten to shut it down. This meant that every word spoken in the lab was being translated into 17 different alien languages and broadcast across multiple star systems. His innocent comment about wanting a sweet Fang companion traveled through space at the speed of light. The quantum signals reached alien worlds that humans had never even heard of. They bounced off communication satellites and passed through alien networks until they reached the most unexpected destination of all. On the other side of the galaxy, the Veltari Empire received what their computers translated as an official human diplomatic request. The message read, "Human researcher formally requests companion species with dental weaponry and emotional attachment capabilities. Designation: Sweet Fang. Contact established through official channels. Response required within standard cycle." The Veltari were known throughout the galaxy as the fiercest warrior race alive. They were small and fast, with sharp teeth and reflexes that could cut through steel. Their homeworld was covered in dangerous forests, where only the strongest survived. They had been fighting wars for thousands of years and had never lost a single battle. But the Veltari had one weakness that no other species knew about. They were incredibly curious about other life forms, especially ones that seemed brave enough to challenge them. The idea that humans were asking for a warrior companion with specific fighting abilities made them very interested. What kind of species would make such a bold request? The message caused quite a stir in the Veltari High Council. The elders gathered in their great hall to discuss this strange communication from the humans. They had heard stories about this new species that had recently joined the galactic community. Humans were supposed to be weak and peaceful creatures who spent most of their time doing research and exploring space, yet here was proof that humans were more interesting than anyone had thought. The request was very specific. Someone wanted a companion with fangs who could form emotional bonds. This sounded like a challenge to the Veltari way of life. It was almost insulting that these humans thought they could just ask for one of their warriors, like ordering food from a menu. The council debated for hours. Some wanted to ignore the message. Others thought it was a trap designed to lure Veltari warriors into human space. But the youngest council member, a female named Nara, had a different idea. She suggested that maybe the humans were genuinely interested In cultural exchange, maybe this was their way of showing respect for Veltari's strength. Nara volunteered to investigate the request personally. She was one of their best scouts, fast and clever, with a talent for learning new languages. She could travel to this human space station and find out what they really wanted. If it was a trap, she could escape easily. If it was genuine, she could report back to the council with valuable information about human society. The council agreed to let her go. They prepared a small ship and gave her everything she might need for a long journey. Nara studied human language files and learned about their customs. She was excited about the mission. It had been a long time since she had done anything really interesting. Meanwhile, back on station, Aurora Day had completely forgotten about his random comment. He and Hannah had cleaned up the spilled alien slime and were working on preparing new samples for tomorrow. The lab was quiet except for the hum of machines and the occasional beep from their computers. Day looked at his drawing again and smiled. The little creature still looked cute and friendly. He tore the page out of his notebook and pinned it to the wall next to his desk. Maybe having it there would make the lab feel less lonely. He had no idea that his silly sketch was about to become very real. Hannah finished entering data into her computer and stretched her arms. She looked tired and stressed, just like Day. The work was important, but it was also repetitive and sometimes boring. She glanced at Day's drawing on the wall and shook her head. "You and your weird imagination," she said, but she was smiling when she said it. That night, Day went to bed thinking about his failed experiments and wondering if he would ever discover anything truly important. Little did he know that his casual wish for a sweet Fang companion was already traveling through space towards someone who would take it very seriously somewhere. In the darkness between stars, a small Veltari ship moved silently towards Station Aurora. Inside, Nara studied human customs and practiced speaking their language. She was curious about the researcher who had made such an unusual request. What kind of person would ask for a companion with fangs? Was this human brave or just foolish? She would find out soon enough. The ship moved closer to human space, carrying with it the beginning of an adventure that would change everything for both species. Neither Day nor Nara knew it yet, but their lives were about to become much more interesting than either of them had ever imagined. The joke was already in motion, and there was no stopping it now. The next morning, Day walked into his lab carrying a cup of terrible coffee from the emergency supply. The broken coffee machine was still waiting for repair parts, and the backup unit made drinks that tasted like liquid metal. He was already thinking about another boring day of failed experiments when he saw something that made him drop his cup. A small female figure was sitting cross-legged on his desk. She had dark hair that shimmered in the lab lights and pointed ears that twitched when she heard the cup crash to the floor. Her skin was pale with a slight golden undertone, and when she turned to look at him, he saw large eyes that seemed to glow with their own light. But the most striking things about her were her teeth and tail. When she smiled, he could see small, sharp fangs that gleamed white in the artificial light. Her tail was long and covered in soft-looking fur that moved back and forth like a cat's tail when it was curious or excited. She was wearing some kind of fitted uniform that looked like it was made from materials he had never seen before. The creature spoke in perfect Korean with a slight musical quality to her voice that made the words sound like singing. "Hello, Kim Day. I am Nara of the Veltari Empire. Have come in response to your request for a sweet Fang companion." Day stared at her with his mouth hanging open. His brain tried to process what he was seeing and hearing, but nothing made sense. A living alien was sitting on his desk, speaking his language and claiming he had asked for her. Where had she come from? How did she get on the station? Why did she know his name behind him? He heard another crash and turned to see Hannah standing in the doorway. Her tablet lay in pieces on the floor, and her face had gone completely white. She was staring at Nara like she was seeing a ghost or maybe something much worse. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Nara seemed completely unbothered by their shock. She picked up one of Day's research notebooks and started flipping through it with obvious interest. Her tail flicked back and forth as she studied his drawings and notes. "Fascinating," she said. "Your species has such creative ways of documenting biological data. These sketches show remarkable attention to detail." Day finally found his voice. "What are you?" he managed to say, though it came out as more of a squeak than actual words. "How did you get here? Why are you on my desk?" "I am Veltari, as I said," Nara replied patiently. "I traveled here in Response to your formal request for a companion with dental weaponry and emotional attachment capabilities, you specified the designation. Sweet Fang, which is quite poetic. I arrived this morning and used standard infiltration techniques to locate. Your laboratory standard infiltration techniques, Hannah whispered. Her voice sounded strangled. She slowly moved into the lab, keeping her eyes fixed on. Nara, you mean you broke into a secured space station break-in is such a harsh term, Nara said with another Fang-revealing smile. I prefer to think of it as enthusiastic arrival. Your security systems are interesting but not particularly challenging. My people have been bypassing similar technology for centuries. Dave felt like the universe was playing some kind of cosmic joke on him yesterday. His biggest problem had been a broken coffee machine. Today there was an alien warrior sitting on his desk eating his leftover sandwich. How had his life become so complicated so quickly? Wait, he said as his brain finally started working again. You said I made a request. I never made any request. I don't even know what a Veltari is. Nara tilted her head and her ears twitched in what might have been confusion or amusement. Your quantum translator broadcast a very clear message across 17 star systems. The request was quite specific. You asked for a cute alien companion with fangs who could make your research more interesting. The quantum translator, Hannah said. Suddenly her face went from white to green. I forgot to turn off the quantum translator after the morning briefing with the Galactic Council. Oh no, this is bad. This is very bad. What exactly is bad about it? Nara asked. She had finished Day's sandwich and was now examining his collection of alien specimens with professional interest. These samples are fascinating. You have creatures here from at least 12 different worlds. Your research methods are quite advanced for such a young species. Hannah started pacing back and forth while pulling at her hair. The problem is that your people probably think this was an official diplomatic contact. We need to call Commander Park right now. We need to explain that this was all a mistake before it turns into an interstellar incident. Mistake, Nara said. Her tail stopped moving and her golden eyes focused on Day with uncomfortable intensity. You did not mean to call for a Veltari companion. This was not a deliberate request. Day felt heat rise in his cheeks. No, it was just a stupid comment I made while I was drawing. I was frustrated and bored and I said something silly. I never meant for anyone to actually hear it, especially not aliens from across the galaxy. For the first time since her arrival, Nara looked uncertain. Her confident smile faded and she wrapped her tail around herself like a security blanket. I see, she said quietly. So, I have traveled across space to answer a call that was never meant to be made. The sadness in her voice made Day's chest hurt in a way he didn't understand. She looked so small sitting on his desk with her tail curled around her body like she was trying to make herself invisible. He wanted to say something to make her feel better, but he didn't know what before anyone could speak again. The lab door burst open and Commander Park Ji-won stormed in, followed by 3 security officers. The middle-aged woman looked like she hadn't slept in days and her uniform was wrinkled. She took one look at Nara and her face went through several different expressions before settling on resigned exhaustion. Dr. Kim, she said in a voice that could freeze helium. Please tell me you have a very good explanation for why there is an unauthorized alien life form in my laboratory, and please tell me it has nothing to do with the 17 different messages I have received from the Galactic Council about some kind of cultural exchange program that no one told me about. Nara hopped down from the desk and gave Commander Park a formal bow that somehow managed to look both respectful and slightly mocking. Greetings, Commander. I am Nara, Scout of the Veltari Empire. I have come to fulfill Dr. Kim's request for companionship. I apologize for any inconvenience my arrival may have caused. Commander Park closed her eyes and took several deep breaths. When she opened them again, she looked like she was calculating how much paperwork this was going to generate. Dr. Kim, she said slowly, did you or did you not request an alien companion? It was an accident. Day said miserably. I made a joke and the quantum translator was still on. I never meant for this to happen, Commander. Park nodded like this was exactly what she had expected. The quantum translator that was supposed to be turned off after the council meeting, the one that broadcast to the 17 star systems, the one that would interpret any casual comment as an official diplomatic communication. Yes, ma'am. That one. Commander Park looked at Nara, who was watching this exchange with obvious fascination. Ms. Nara, she said, I assume your people are expecting some kind of response to this request. 3. Ships carrying the evaluation committee are already en route, Nara said cheerfully. They should arrive within 2 standard cycles. They are very excited to meet humans and assess whether your species is compatible with Veltari cultural exchange programs. The security officers looked at each other nervously. Commander Park sat down heavily in Day's chair and put her head in her hands. This just keeps getting better, she muttered. What exactly does a Veltari cultural exchange program involve? Oh, the usual things, Nara said casually. Combat assessments, psychological evaluations, compatibility testing. We are very thorough when it comes to potential bonding partners. We want to make sure both species benefit from the arrangement bonding. Partners, Hannah squeaked. 3 more ships day. Whispered combat assessments, one of the security officers said faintly. Commander Park looked up from her hands with the expression of someone who was seriously considering early retirement. This is going to be the longest week of my career. 2 days later, Station Aurora was buzzing with nervous energy like a hive full of anxious bees. Commander Park had barely slept since Nara's arrival. She had spent every waking hour reading diplomatic protocols and trying to figure out how to handle a first contact situation that had started with someone's lunch break doodles. The security team had been working overtime to prepare for the arrival of 3 Veltari ships. They had no idea what to expect from a warrior race that could apparently infiltrate space stations without triggering a single alarm. The weapons locker had been nearly emptied, and every corridor now had at least 2 guards patrolling it. Day had spent the last 2 days watching Nara turn his orderly lab into something that actually worked better than before. She had reorganized all his equipment according to some alien logic that made his experiments run smoother. She had also fixed 3 broken machines just by listening to them and making small adjustments with tools from her belt. What bothered him most was how much he was starting to enjoy her company. She had a way of making even the most boring research tasks interesting. With her running commentary and strange observations, she noticed things about the alien specimens that he had missed after months of study. Her insights were so valuable that he had started taking notes on everything she said, but she was also incredibly dangerous during a routine safety drill. She had moved so fast she seemed to blur across the room. She had disabled 3 security officers before anyone realized what was happening. Her movements were like liquid metal, smooth and deadly and completely beyond human ability to follow. The worst part was how normal she seemed. When she wasn't demonstrating her combat skills, she laughed at his terrible jokes. She showed genuine concern when Hannah cut her hand on a broken beaker. She had developed an addiction to human chocolate that made her purr like a contented cat. The contradiction between her lethal abilities and her sweet personality was driving everyone slightly insane. When the Veltari ships finally arrived, they came in fast and silent like shadows moving across the stars. The station sensors detected them only when they were already docking, which made the security team very unhappy. 3 sleek vessels that looked more like living creatures than machines attached themselves to the station's outer hull with organic-looking connections. Commander Park stood in the main docking bay with her best dress uniform and her most diplomatic smile. She had no idea what to expect from a delegation of warrior aliens. Her hands were sweating inside her gloves, and she kept rehearsing her prepared greeting speech in her head. The airlock opened with a soft hiss, and 3 figures stepped onto the station. They were all similar to Nara, small and graceful with pointed ears and long tails, but each one was unique in their own way. The leader was slightly taller than the others, with silver-streaked hair and scars across his arms that spoke of countless battles. He approached Commander Park with fluid movements that somehow managed to look both respectful and predatory. His golden eyes took in every detail of the docking bay, including the positions of all the security officers. Greetings, Commander. I am Kai of the Veltari Empire. We have come to evaluate this cultural exchange request. Behind him came 2 younger Veltari who looked around the station with obvious excitement. The male had bright, copper-colored hair and was already examining the docking clamps with professional interest. The female had intricate tattoos covering her arms and was listening to something with her head tilted, like she was hearing sounds no one else could detect. I am Jin, Kai said, gesturing to the copper-haired male. He is our technical specialist, and this is Swa, our communications expert. We are honored to visit your station and learn about human customs, Commander. Park managed to get through her prepared speech without stuttering, too. Badly, she explained that Station Aurora was primarily a research facility and that they were not really prepared for a formal diplomatic visit. The Veltari listened politely, but she could see them taking note of everything from the security arrangements to the quality of the air recycling system. They finally made it to the main lab where Day and Hana were waiting. The real surprises began. Jin took one look at the broken coffee machine in the corner and immediately started taking it apart with tools that seemed to appear from nowhere. He had it working again in less than 10 minutes, and the coffee it made was better than it had ever been before. Swa spent her time talking with Choi Minho, the station's communications officer. She was fascinated by their methods of translating alien languages, and within an hour she was helping him decode transmissions from 3 different newly discovered civilizations. Her ear for languages was incredible, and she could pick up nuances that their best computer programs missed. But it was Kai who surprised everyone the most. Despite his fearsome appearance and battle scars, he turned out to be a poet who spoke in flowing verses about the beauty of human emotions. He was particularly interested in their concept of friendship and spent hours asking questions about how humans formed emotional bonds with each other. The strange thing was how Nara changed when her people arrived. She became more reserved and formal, like she was trying to maintain some kind of professional distance she no longer perched on Day's desk during work hours, and her playful commentary became clinical and observational. Day found himself missing the easy intimacy they had developed over the past few days. He missed the way she would curl her tail around his arm when she was concentrating on something interesting. He missed her habit of stealing bites of his lunch and making those happy purring sounds when she found something particularly tasty. During their first evening together, Kai explained more about why they had really come. The Veltari had been watching human expansion into space with great interest. Most new species that joined the galactic community were either very advanced or very primitive. Humans were unusual because they were somewhere in between, with technology that was impressive but not overwhelming. What really interested the Veltari was human emotional capacity. Most warrior races had to suppress their feelings to be effective in combat, but humans seemed to be able to maintain strong emotional connections while still being capable fighters. This was a combination that the Veltari found both fascinating and attractive. Swa had spent her time studying human cultural broadcasts and was particularly intrigued by their concept of romantic love. The Veltari had their own bonding rituals, but they were primarily based on combat compatibility and shared goals. The human idea of choosing a partner based on emotional connection was completely foreign to them. Jin, meanwhile, had fallen in love with human engineering. Human technology was less advanced than Veltari systems, but it was incredibly creative and adaptable. Every machine he examined had been modified and improved in ways that showed genuine innovation. He spent hours in the engineering sections of the station learning how humans approached technical problems. As the days passed, it became clear that this was not just a simple cultural exchange. The Veltari were evaluating humans as potential allies, or maybe something even more significant. They were testing human capabilities, both technical and emotional, to see if the 2 species could work together on a deeper level. But there was something else going on, something that made Nara act strange around her own people. Day noticed how she would sometimes start to say something and then stop herself. He saw the way Kai would look at her with expressions that seemed to carry hidden meanings. He felt like there was an entire conversation happening that he could not understand. One evening, he found Nara alone in the observation deck, staring out at the stars through the massive viewport. Her tail was wrapped around her feet, and she looked smaller and more vulnerable than he had ever seen her. "What are you really doing here?" he asked quietly. "I mean, what is this really about?" Nara was quiet for a long time before she answered. "We are here to see if humans are suitable," she said finally. Her voice was so soft he had to strain to hear it. Suitable for what he asked, but somehow he already knew the answer was going to change everything. Suitable for bonding, she whispered without looking at him, for becoming life partners with Veltari warriors. Your request was not interpreted as a call for friendship or cultural exchange. It was interpreted as a mating proposal. The words hit Day like a physical blow. He sat down heavily beside her as the full implications of what she was saying sank in his stupid joke about wanting a sweet Fang. Companion had been translated as a marriage proposal to an alien warrior race, and Nara had not come as an ambassador, or a friend. She had come as a potential bride. The truth came out during what should have been a routine cultural presentation. Dr. Song Yuna, the station's head anthropologist, was giving a lecture about human social structures to the Veltari delegation. The lecture hall was packed with curious crew members who wanted to learn more about their alien visitors. Dr. Song was explaining human family structures when Kai made what seemed like an innocent comment about the bonding ritual that had brought them to the station. The room went quiet, and Dr. Song paused in the middle of her sentence. "What bonding ritual?" she asked with the careful tone of someone who suspected they were about to hear bad. Nuskai looked surprised by the question. "The ritual initiated by researcher Kim Dae when he requested a sweet Fang companion through your quantum translation network, the formal proposal that brought Nara to your station as a potential life mate." The silence that followed was so complete that everyone could hear the hum of the station's life support systems. Dr. Song sat down heavily in her chair, and Commander Park, who had been standing near the back of the room, looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. "Potential life mate," Hana whispered from her seat near the front of the room. Her face had gone white again, and she was gripping the arms of her chair so hard her knuckles were visible. They felt like all the air had been sucked out of the room. He tried to speak, but no words came out. His brain was spinning as he processed what Kai had just said. A bonding ritual, a formal proposal, a potential life mate. How had his stupid joke turned into something so serious? Nara, who had been sitting quietly beside the other Veltari, suddenly looked uncomfortable. Her tail stopped moving, and she stared at her hands folded in her lap. She seemed to be trying to make herself invisible, which was quite a feat for someone with glowing golden eyes. Dar Song recovered first and asked the question everyone was thinking. "Could you explain exactly what you mean by bonding ritual? What did our translation system actually broadcast to your people?" Kai exchanged glances with Jin and Swa before answering. The message was quite specific. It requested a warrior companion with dental weaponry and emotional attachment capabilities. The designation Sweet Fang indicated a preference for a female warrior with both combat skills and the ability to form deep emotional bonds. In Veltari culture, this is a formal proposal for life partnership. Life partnership, Jin added helpfully, for humans. I believe the equivalent would be marriage, except that Veltari bonding is permanent and involves sharing not just lives but consciousness itself. Bonded pairs develop empathic connections that allow them to sense each other's emotions and physical state across vast distances. Commander Park finally found her voice. "Are you telling me that Dr. Kim accidentally proposed marriage to your entire species?" "Not to our entire species," Swa said, with what might have been amusement, "only to unmated female warriors who met his specifications, which is why Nara was chosen to respond. She is one of our best scouts, and she fit all the requirements mentioned in the proposal." They managed to make a sound that was somewhere between a squeak and a groan. Everyone in the room turned to look at him, and he felt his face burning with embarrassment. This was worse than any nightmare he could have imagined. Not only had he accidentally summoned aliens to the station, but he had apparently proposed marriage to one of them. Nara finally spoke up, her voice barely above a whisper. "I came here believing that Kim Dae had deliberately called for me," she said. "I thought his research into xenobiology was a courtship display designed to prove his worthiness as a partner. Every kind gesture, every shared meal, every moment of companionship I interpreted as part of our bonding process." The room was silent again as everyone absorbed this information. Day stared at Nara with growing horror as he realized what she was saying. She had been operating under the assumption that he was courting her, that every friendly interaction between them had been part of some elaborate alien mating ritual. "How long?" Day croaked. "How long have you been thinking we were engaged?" "Since the moment I arrived on your station," Nara replied without looking at him. In Veltari culture, when a warrior responds to a bonding call, it is considered a formal acceptance of courtship. The evaluation period begins immediately to determine compatibility. Evaluation period, Hannah said faintly. "That is why we are here," Kai explained. "The three of us came to assess whether humans in general and Kim Dae specifically are suitable partners for Veltari warriors. We have been observing your social interactions, your emotional responses, your technical capabilities, and your capacity for forming lasting bonds. Dr. Song leaned forward in her chair. What exactly does this evaluation involve, and what happens if we pass or fail if the evaluation is positive? Kai said. Then the bonding can be completed with formal ceremonies and the sharing of life essence. If the evaluation is negative, then Nara returns to our home world and the matter is considered closed. Though a failed bonding evaluation can have diplomatic implications. Diplomatic implications, Commander Park repeated in a voice that suggested she was already calculating the paperwork involved. Jin nodded enthusiastically. If humans prove unsuitable for bonding, it could affect trade relationships, territorial agreements, and our willingness to share certain technologies. But if the bonding is successful, it could open up entirely new possibilities for cooperation between our species. Swa added something that made the situation even more complicated. There is also the matter of Nara's status within our society. A warrior who accepts a bonding call but fails to complete the process faces questions about their judgment and capabilities. It can affect their rank and their future opportunities. All eyes turned to Nara, who seemed to shrink further into her chair. She was still staring at her hands, and her tail was wrapped so tightly around her waist that it looked painful. Day realized with a sick feeling that his accidental proposal had put her in an impossible position. If he rejected the bonding, she would face consequences among her own people for failing to complete her mission. If he accepted it, he would be committing to something he did not understand with someone he barely knew, even though he was starting to care about her more than he wanted to admit. Dr. Song cleared her throat and asked the question that was on everyone's mind. What exactly does Veltari bonding involve? What would Kim Dae be agreeing to if he chose to complete this process? The bonding involves the permanent joining of two lives, Kai explained. It is not just a social contract like human marriage, but a spiritual and psychic connection that cannot be broken. Bonded pairs share emotions, thoughts, and even physical sensations. They become two parts of a single whole. That sounds beautiful, Hana said softly, but also terrifying. What if the people involved are not compatible? What if they make a mistake? That is why the evaluation period exists, Swa replied, to ensure compatibility before the permanent bond is formed. Once the bonding is complete, it cannot be undone. Even death does not completely sever the connection. The surviving partner carries part of their mate within them forever. The weight of what they were discussing settled over the room like a heavy blanket. Day looked at Nara and felt his heart breaking for her. She had traveled across the galaxy believing she was answering a genuine call for companionship. Instead, she had found someone who had stumbled into the situation by accident. But as he watched her sitting there, small and vulnerable, with her golden eyes fixed on her folded hands, he realized something that surprised him. The idea of bonding with her did not terrify him as much as it should have. In fact, part of him found the concept strangely appealing. The thought of sharing his life with someone who understood him completely, who could sense his emotions and support him through anything, was not frightening. It was tempting, maybe even wonderful, if it was with the right person. And looking at Nara, with her quick intelligence and her gentle humor and her way of making even the most mundane tasks feel like adventures, he was starting to think she might be exactly the right person. The question was whether she would want to bond with someone who had never meant to call for her in the first place. The days following the revelation were awkward in ways that transcended species barriers. Everyone on station, Aurora, seemed to be walking on eggshells, afraid to say anything that might make the situation worse. The crew members whispered in corridors and avoided making eye contact with either Day or Nara. Nara threw herself into station work with almost desperate energy. She helped Jin repair broken systems that had been malfunctioning for months. She worked with Swa to improve the communications array and even assisted the medical team with analyzing alien pathogens that had been puzzling them for weeks. But she avoided being alone with Day when their paths crossed in the lab or the corridors. She was polite but distant. She treated him like a colleague rather than someone she had been considering as a life partner. The easy companionship they had developed was gone, replaced by a formal politeness that hurt more than anger would have. The other Veltari watched this careful dance with expressions that ranged from amusement to concern. Kai spent his time observing human social interactions and taking notes in a journal that never seemed to leave his side. Jin had become best friends with the engineering staff and was teaching them Veltari repair techniques that made their jobs much easier. Swa, meanwhile, had appointed herself as unofficial cultural interpreter. She spent hours explaining Veltari customs to anyone who would listen and asking detailed questions about human relationships. Her fascination with human bonding rituals was both touching and slightly overwhelming. Commander Park called Day into her office for what was possibly the strangest conversation of her military career. She sat behind her desk looking like she had aged 10 years in the past week and gestured for him to take a seat. Dr. Kim, she said without preamble. I need to know your intentions regarding this situation. The diplomatic implications are staggering, and I need to understand what we are dealing with. Day shifted uncomfortably in his chair. What do you mean, Commander? I mean, Park said slowly. Do you intend to complete this accidental engagement, or are you going to reject Nara and send her back to her people? Because either choice is going to have consequences that extend far beyond this station. What kind of consequences? Day asked, though he was afraid he already knew the answer. If you reject her, Park explained, it could be interpreted as an insult to the entire Veltari species. They sent one of their best warriors in response to what they believed was a formal proposal. Having her return unbonded could damage human Veltari relations for generations, and if I accept her, then you would be pioneering the first official human Veltari bonding, Park said, with all the political, social, and personal complications that entails. You would essentially be entering uncharted territory in interspecies diplomacy. Plus, Park continued, there is the small matter of what bonding actually involves. According to Kai, you would be sharing consciousness with Nara for the rest of your life. You would know her thoughts and feelings, and she would know yours. There would be no privacy, no secrets, no ability to hide from each other. The idea should have been terrifying, but instead Day found himself thinking about how lonely he had been before Nara arrived. He thought about his boring routine and his failed experiments and how everything had seemed more interesting when she was there to share it with. That evening, Hana cornered him in the lab. She had spent the day interviewing the Veltari delegation about their bonding customs, and she looked both excited and worried. I need to tell you what I learned, she said without preamble. About what? Day asked, though he suspected he did not want to hear the answer about what bonding actually means. Hana said. She pulled up a chair and sat down facing him. The connection goes deeper than anything we have in human culture. Bonded pairs can sense each other's emotions across vast distances. They know when their partner is hurt or afraid or happy. That sounds intense, Day said weakly. It gets more intense, Hana continued. They also share dreams sometimes, and they can communicate without speaking, just by thinking at each other, and if one of them dies, the other one feels it like losing part of their soul. But Hana added with a smile, it's also supposed to be incredibly beautiful. The Veltari I talked to described it as being complete for the first time in their lives, like finding the missing piece of themselves they never knew was gone. Day thought about Nara and how she made even the most mundane tasks feel meaningful. He thought about her laugh and the way her tail flicked when she was concentrating, and how she had made his sterile lab feel like home. The breaking point came 2 days later when Day overheard Nara talking to Kai in their own language. He was passing by the observation deck when he heard voices and recognized Nara's musical tone. Even without understanding the words, he could hear the sadness in her voice. He pressed himself against the wall and listened to their conversation, wishing he could understand what they were saying. The tone was serious, and several times he heard Nara make sounds that might have been sighs or possibly the Veltari equivalent of crying when their voices stopped. Day waited a few minutes before looking around the corner. Kai was gone, but Nara was still there, sitting on the floor, with her knees drawn up to her chest and her tail wrapped around her like a blanket. She was staring out at the stars with an expression of such loneliness that it made his chest ache. That night Day could not sleep. He tossed and turned in his narrow station bunk, thinking about everything that had happened. His stupid joke had created this mess, but somehow it had also brought Nara into his life, and despite all the complications and cultural misunderstandings, he could not imagine his life without her anymore. She had reorganized his lab and fixed his broken equipment, but more than that, she had brought light and laughter into his boring existence. She noticed things he missed and understood parts of his work that he had struggled with alone. Her presence made everything better, brighter, more meaningful. The next morning he made his decision. He found Nara in the observation deck again sitting in exactly the same spot where he had seen her the night before. She looked up when he approached, but did not smile or speak. "I need to tell you something," he said, sitting down beside her on the cold floor. "I need to explain about the joke that started all this." Nara nodded, but kept looking out at the stars. "You do not need to explain," she said quietly. "I understand that you never meant to call for me, that your request was accidental." "That is true," Day said. "But I need you to understand something else. Just because I called for you by accident does not mean I am sorry you came." Nara turned to look at him with surprise in her golden eyes. "You are not?" "No," he said firmly. "I am not sorry at all. You have made my life better in every possible way. Before you arrived, I was bored and lonely and going through the motions of living. You changed all that just by being yourself, but I was supposed to be your chosen partner." Nara said. Her voice was small and hurt. "Instead, I am just a mistake, someone who answered a call that was never meant for her." Day reached out and gently touched her hand. "Maybe you were not my chosen partner originally," he said, "but you are my choice now. If you will have me, I want to complete the bonding. I want to share my life with you for real, not because of some translation error, but because I cannot imagine being without you anymore." Nara stared at him with wide eyes, searching his face for any sign that he was just being kind or feeling obligated. After a long moment, she smiled and her fangs glinted in the starlight. "Are you certain?" she asked. "Because bonding is forever. There is no changing your mind later." "I am certain," Day said, and realized he had never been more sure of anything in his life. "Then yes," she whispered, "I will bond with you." "Kim Day, not because you called for me, but because I choose you too." The news of Day and Nara's decision to complete the bonding spread through Station Aurora like wildfire. The crew members' reaction ranged from excitement to nervousness to outright fascination. Most had never witnessed an interspecies relationship before, let alone one that involved permanent psychic connection. Commander Park handled the diplomatic implications with her usual efficiency. She sent carefully worded messages to both the Galactic Council and the Veltari High Command explaining the situation and requesting guidance on the proper protocols for an interspecies bonding ceremony. She also started the paperwork for what would probably be the most unusual marriage certificate in human history. Dr. Song threw herself into researching Veltari bonding rituals with academic enthusiasm. She spent hours interviewing Kaiswa and Jin about the traditional ceremonies and their cultural significance. She wanted to make sure that the bonding was conducted properly and respectfully according to Veltari customs. Jin and Swa were thrilled by the development. They had grown fond of the humans during their stay, and the idea of having a permanent connection between their species was exciting. Jin spent his time preparing technical gifts for the ceremony, including a communication device that would allow Day and Nara to stay in contact with both their peoples no matter where their lives took them. Swa worked with the station's linguist to create a ceremony that honored both human and Veltari traditions. She wrote vows that could be spoken in both languages and researched Earth customs that might complement Veltari rituals. The cultural fusion was complex but beautiful in its own way. Kai took on the role of ceremony officiant, which was both an honor and a responsibility in Veltari culture. He spent days preparing the ritual space and gathering the necessary materials, including crystals from the Veltari homeworld and herbs that had been blessed by their spiritual leaders. The preparation time also gave Day and Nara a chance to really talk about what they were committing to. They spent hours discussing their hopes and fears, their dreams for the future, and their understanding of what the bonding would mean for both of them. Nara explained that bonded Veltari pairs often traveled together, exploring new worlds and taking on missions that required their combined skills. She painted pictures with words of distant planets and alien civilizations that needed diplomatic contact or scientific study. The idea of sharing such adventures with her made Day's heart race with excitement. Day told her about his research and his dreams of making discoveries that would benefit both their species. He had always imagined doing his work alone, but the thought of having a partner who could contribute her own knowledge and perspectives was incredibly appealing. Their combined expertise could open up entirely new fields of study. They also talked about the practical aspects of their future life together. They would be stronger, faster, and more capable than either could be alone. The bonding would enhance both their natural abilities and give them access to each other's skills and knowledge. The night before the ceremony, Hannah threw what she called a bachelor party, though it was unlike any bachelor party in human history. The entire station crew gathered in the main recreation hall along with the Veltari delegation. Everyone brought food from their home regions, creating a feast that represented dozens of different worlds and cultures. Nera seemed overwhelmed by the